As I begin my woodland walk on this end of summer days, it's already cool and the forest looks a little bit darker even though the sun is shining brightly. But what's lovely about the forest is that you feel very comforted by the trees and the ground and the smell of the earth and the living and dying, the life cycle. When I first heard the sound of nature going through its transformational process and had the whole understanding of life and death and resurrection and everlastingness all opened up, that vision, that understanding. No one taught it to me. It was as though it was an open book inside my mind that told me all those things, and that gave me even greater comfort. And it happened when I was lying down on a dead tree log in the sun. And this was many years ago. And having remembered that, and always seeking some place to be in deep nature, even for 15 or 20 minutes. So I found that spot, that space near where I am frequently, and take advantage of it as frequently as I can. And it always gives me such great comfort to be among my friends, the trees. I think the trees are very much like people because they live, they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But when you see this is the feature, I would say, of the forest, the untouched forest by human hands. That's what they call primeval forest, is untouched by human hands. It has very old trees, sometimes up to 1,000 years, and nothing is moved. So you see the many dead trees lying on the ground, and you see the different layers and levels of decomposition and decay in all of the creatures and growths that take place. And that's what you have in this little piece of the primeval, I call it. And just walking in here right now, and the sun is creeping through the branches above on my face as I look up, and all the trees, all my friends are with me today. And the dead friends, those who have lost their tree vitality by growing and harvesting, began to become the base of the new food chain, because the trees become food for the forest. And ultimately, that is going to feed all of us. And so not only does the decomposition feed everybody, it feeds it energetically in all the senses, the outer senses, the smell, the feel, the taste. All those outer senses are nourished by the experience of the walk. The inner senses are also nourished. You don't get that on asphalt. Running and walking and doing your aerobics, that's all very good. But this surpasses that. I'm so happy that I can just be here, be alone, which I call all one, alone, all one with all my friends, and feel complete. There's not many places, I think, where I feel that way. Every time I come into the woods, I learn something. There's new colors. There's new configuration. Because even though no man or person has maybe moved anything, but nature has moved A tree has fallen, a new tree has fallen. Something has crumbled and is no longer in the shape it was. So I call it living sculpture, these dead tree forms. They are still alive to the food chain of service, the base of life. And this is why it's so important not to kill trees. One fortunate thing about Monmouth County, where I live, is they have one of the most assertive programs for retaining unused land. In other words, and these parks are known to be some of the very best in the United States. And so many people take care that we have as much of this as possible. So there's many parks that you can go to and have this experience, and there's no cost. Just go and be there. There are two experiences that stand out for me in the park right now. And one is when I bring my friends. I call them tree huggers because they love the park also. Pretty much for maybe the same reasons and their own personal reasons, but I think it all kind of comes down to much of the same, of closer to nature, closer to our connection to source, however you may name that or experience it. And I brought several people into the woods to walk. And one of the best experiences has been when we sit down on a congregation of tree logs and have a chat. And usually it's about something that I'm talking about now, or something about trees and diseases of trees. We have a master gardener who comes with us and teaches us about what's going on. And these trees all suffer diseases like humans. Something attacked them, and they protect themselves, and they thrive, even though they may have some kind of invasion on their bark. We might call it a cancer, they may call it a cankor. Whatever the name is given, there is that tree experience that matches very much the human experience. And life goes on. And we learn. The idea that you're walking a path that has been man-made through the nature, I think is a very good metaphor or analogy. Confucius says Tao is the nature in Tao, the Tao in nature, and that it instructs you. It's a path to walk. There's instruction to follow. And the instruction comes from nature itself and our willingness to be there, to learn and to listen. And then to have others join us is so lovely. The other experience, and truly I would say the best of all, is the day that I walked in and I was very sad. And I sat down on one of my tree logs. And very soon I noticed on my pink shirt a cicada. And that's an insect that lives, I think, at the base of trees and makes that funny sound, very screeching almost like sound sometimes, high in the trees. And I was very sad. In fact, I had tears, and I looked down at the cicada's little black eyes looking up at me. And I immediately felt comforted. I felt I could talk and have a conversation and say what I needed to say, and it was listening and very patiently listening. And I sort of said everything I needed to say. And then it was time to go, and so I gently helped it off of my pink blouse. The next day I came back, and I was sitting on the same log, and right across on another log was a cicada giving birth. And fortunately I was able to videotape it not all the way to the completion of the birth, which I assume it was. That moment, again, was one of those, thank you, God, for the information, for the assurance, for the realization that life goes on. There is an everlastingness. And this is not something science can measure and control and predict. I know there's a lot of talk about science and spirituality or religion not able to integrate and be appreciated mutually. Some people say everything is only what you can measure and see, science, and if science says so, it is so. When I was growing up, if the Bible said so, it is so. And so that struggle right now is a pretty strong struggle. If you notice today, oftentimes, anytime a person wants to sell you something or convince you of something, they say, well, the science says, and that means this is true. Well, it's limited as science is. It does provide a very important service to us, and yet it's not the whole story, because it doesn't tell anything about the interior experience, what I'm talking about now. However, I am learning science from the inside out. And I think if we're going to have a theory of everything, we have to embrace both the physical and the non-physical, the manifest and the non-manifest, the exterior and the interior. If we're going to tell the whole story, the full history, her story, his story, our story, the complete story, we cannot leave out the inner experience, which religion and spirituality and philosophy and poetry all give us. So I just discovered today in doing this talk that by going deeply into the nature, as I understand it, I get both a lot of exterior stimulation and much inside information to go with it. And it all comes together in a tremendous sense of completeness, oneness. And I'm not sure there's anything better than that. That comes, for me personally, closer to what the Tao in nature is about, the experience of the Tao in nature. So in collecting photographs and videos and bringing friends into the woods to share this with, it's been a highlight in my life. One other experience in my studies as an independent researcher of understanding wisdom and spirituality. Back in the writings of the Buddha, the great Buddha, who left, his followers left many writings. It is said that he, in a meditative experience, was able to see inside the body and have written down the description of everything that you would see if you were to x-ray the bodies today, use some kind of an imaging that he was able to have rendered on paper so you could actually see it drawn. Everything that you would see in an imaging or an x-ray today, let's say of the chest or what have you. So that came from inside, inner abilities to look within and to know what's outside. So as above, so below, as outside, so inside. And I am saying that this experience does that for me. So I invite you to go on your own, to bring others with you, because I have a feeling this is one of the many and perhaps very few ways that we can make that connection that we need so much. Some people might say coming home. I've always felt that my home is in my heart. It doesn't matter where I am physically, that my home is in my heart. And perhaps I'm saying as I speak that as I look at the trees around me, it's about 9:15 in the morning, and it's a chilly day. The deer haven't come out yet. It's very quiet. Kids are back in school. There's not one person anywhere near that I can see or hear. And yet I feel so embraced and happy and comfortable and at peace just standing here talking to you. So, welcome. And thank you for sharing this with me.